When you hear the word detachment, most people misunderstand it immediately. They imagine coldness, indifference, giving up, losing desire. But real detachment has nothing to do with not caring. In fact, it requires deep awareness. Detachment is not the absence of intention, it's the absence of desperation. And that single difference changes how reality responds to you. Think about the moments in your life when things finally worked out, not when you forced them, chased them, or obsessed over them, but when you let go. A job opportunity that appeared right after you stopped refreshing your email. A relationship that improved the moment you stopped trying to control every outcome. A solution that arrived only after you accepted that you didn't have one. These aren't coincidences. They follow a pattern most people never consciously recognize. The tighter you grip, the more resistance you create, not because the universe is punishing you, but because desperation distorts perception. When you cling to an outcome, your mind narrows. You stop seeing alternatives. You stop trusting timing. You signal internally that you lack something, and that signal shapes how you act, speak, and decide. Reality responds not to what you want, but to the state you're operating from. Detachment shifts that state. Consider someone trying to impress others at all costs. They rehearse their words, they overthink their image, they crave approval. Ironically, this neediness repels the very respect they want. Now, contrast that with someone who is grounded, comfortable with silence, willing to walk away. They don't chase validation, and because of that, people lean in. The external reaction changes not because of manipulation, but because inner pressure disappeared. The same principle applies to goals, money, love, purpose, everything. When you are attached, you say internally, "I need this to happen for me to be okay." When you detach, you say, "I am okay, and I'm open to what aligns." One posture contracts, the other expands. Detachment doesn't mean you stop taking action. It means you stop tying your self-worth to outcomes you can't fully control. You still move, you still plan, you still care. But you stop begging life to cooperate. You stop arguing with reality. And the moment you stop fighting what is, reality starts moving with you instead of against you. Here's a simple but powerful example. Imagine planting a seed. You water it, you give it sunlight. Then you dig it up every day to check if it's growing. That behavior doesn't come from care, it comes from distrust. Detachment is trusting the process enough to stop interfering. It's knowing when effort turns into sabotage. Most people are exhausted not because they're doing too much, but because they're holding too tightly. They replay conversations, they obsess over timelines, they try to force clarity before it's ready to arrive. Detachment releases that internal friction, and when friction disappears, movement becomes natural. If this perspective already feels different from how you've been approaching life, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe and leave a like. It helps this message reach people who are stuck in effort without flow and might need to hear this today. There's something subtle but crucial here. Reality doesn't respond to force the way we think it does. It responds to coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned, things move faster with less resistance. Attachment creates noise. Detachment creates signal. This is why people often experience breakthroughs right after giving up, not giving up on life, but giving up on control. They stop demanding answers, they stop chasing certainty, and in that openness, life has room to respond. Detachment is not passive, it's precise. It's choosing trust over tension. It's acting without clinging. And once you experience that shift, you realize something profound. Reality has always been listening. It just couldn't hear you through the noise of grasping. When detachment begins to take root, You start noticing changes that feel almost unsettling at first, not because life becomes chaotic, but because it becomes lighter. Situations that once triggered anxiety no longer hook you the same way. Outcomes you used to obsess over lose their emotional grip. And that's when reality starts responding differently, not dramatically, but consistently. One of the clearest signs you're detaching correctly is this: you still care, but you're no longer emotionally hostage to the result. You do your part, then you step back. You stop micromanaging life. And in that space, something interesting happens. Opportunities begin to surface that you couldn't see before, not because they suddenly appeared, but because attachment was blinding you. Think about how many times you were so focused on one outcome that you ignored better ones. One relationship that had to work, one path that had to be the right one, one version of success that looked good on paper but felt empty inside. Attachment narrows vision, detachment widens it, and widened perception is where reality starts cooperating. There's a powerful psychological shift here. When you're attached, every delay feels personal. Every obstacle feels like rejection. But when you detach, delays become information. Obstacles become redirections. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That shift alone changes how you move through the world. Calmer, clearer, less reactive. A good example is relationships. People often say they want love, but what they really want is certainty. They want guarantees. They want control over how someone feels, behaves, commits. And the more they try to secure that certainty, the more unstable the relationship becomes. Detachment doesn't mean withdrawing love. It means removing fear from it. When you stop trying to own the outcome, you create space for authenticity, and authenticity is what deepens connection. The same applies to money. Desperation repels, not because money has emotions, but because desperation changes behavior. It leads to rushed decisions, poor boundaries, undervaluing yourself. Detachment brings patience. Patience leads to better choices. Better choices compound. Reality responds to the quality of your decisions, not the intensity of your wanting. Here's where many people get stuck. They confuse detachment with apathy. They think letting go means lowering standards or suppressing desire. It doesn't. Detachment refines desire. It removes the emotional chaos around it. You still want things, you just stop needing them to validate your worth. And that internal shift is felt externally. People sense when you're grounded, when you're not trying to extract something from them, when you're okay whether they say yes or no. That energy is magnetic. It's calm. It's confident without being loud. And reality mirrors that state back to you. If this is resonating, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, not as a favor, but as a signal that you value content that encourages clarity over chasing and depth over noise. Detachment also teaches timing. When you're attached, everything feels urgent. When you detach, you respect rhythm. You know when to push and when to pause. You stop forcing doors that are clearly resisting and start noticing the ones that open effortlessly. That doesn't mean life becomes easy, it means it becomes efficient. There's a quiet confidence that comes with detachment, a sense that you'll be okay even if things don't unfold exactly as planned. And paradoxically, that confidence is what allows plans to work out more often because you're no longer sabotaging the process with fear. Reality responds to who you're being, not just what you're doing. When you detach, you shift who you're being, from anxious controller to grounded participant. And that shift changes everything. The final and most misunderstood aspect of detachment is this: it's not something you do once and master forever. It's a practice, a daily choice to release what you were never meant to control, while staying fully present with what is in your hands. And the more consistently you practice it, the more clearly you see how reality responds, not out of reward, but out of alignment. When you detach, you stop chasing signs and start becoming one. You no longer need constant confirmation that you're on the right path because you feel it internally. That inner stability changes the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you move through uncertainty. You stop rushing endings and stop clinging to beginnings. You trust transitions. This is why detachment often feels like relief before it feels like success. The first thing you gain isn't money, love, or clarity, it's peace, and peace sharpens judgment. With a calmer nervous system, you make decisions from awareness instead of fear. You respond instead of react, and those decisions quietly reshape your life. There's a moment many people experience after practicing detachment for a while. They realize that a lot of what they were trying to manifest wasn't wrong, it was just mistimed. Detachment doesn't cancel desire, it synchronizes it. When your internal state stops arguing with reality, reality stops resisting you. Think about how often stress made you miss obvious solutions, how urgency pushed you toward shortcuts, how fear disguised itself as motivation. Detachment dissolves that illusion. It replaces urgency with presence, and presence is powerful because it allows you to see what's actually happening, not what you're afraid might happen. This is also where trust deepens, not blind optimism, grounded trust. Trust that if something leaves, it's creating space. Trust that if something delays, it's reorganizing. Trust that if something ends, it's because it no longer matches who you're becoming. That trust isn't passive, it's steady, and reality responds to steadiness. Detachment also changes how you experience loss. Instead of collapsing, you integrate. Instead of clinging, you adapt. You grieve without spiraling. You release without self-betrayal. And that emotional resilience becomes one of your greatest strengths. Life doesn't become predictable, but you become prepared. If you've stayed with this message until now, this is the third and final moment I'll ask. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Not just to support the content, but to remind yourself that you're choosing awareness over urgency and alignment over force. Here's the quiet truth most people never hear. Reality is always responding, but it responds fastest and cleanest when you're not interfering with fear. Detachment removes interference. It clears the signal. And once the signal is clear, movement feels natural instead of forced. So when you feel yourself gripping too tightly, pause. When you notice urgency creeping in, breathe. When you're tempted to force clarity, step back. Detachment isn't withdrawal, it's wisdom. You don't lose anything by letting go of what was never yours to control. You gain perspective, you gain peace, and in that state, reality doesn't need to be chased. It meets you where you are.